Based on the text, how would the author of Text 2 most likely respond to what some researchers contend as described in Text 1? Text 1. Little is known about how plate tectonics, wherein slabs of Earth's crust move over, under, away from, and against one another, began. Some researchers contend that tectonic movements began around 3 billion years ago, often noting the computer models of Earth's mantle temperature at the time indicate that the mantle would not have been sufficiently molten to enable the plates to move. Text 2. Ultimately, any plausible claim about the inception of tectonic movement must rely on empirical evidence from the geological record. Researcher Riju Chaudhry and his team analyzed the geochemistry of zircon crystals to gain insight into the chemical composition of the magma from which the crystals had formed, and based on the data, compellingly argue that plate tectonics may have been occurring as early as 4.2 billion years ago. So looking at these two texts, we can clearly see that text 1 highlights how that it introduces this topic and highlights how little is known about plate tectonics and when it began. And some researchers believe that plate tectonics began around 3 billion years ago, as computer models show that this is around the time where the mantle would have been sufficiently molten to enable the plates to move. But text 2 highlights that the only evidence that can prove the inception of plate tectonics must rest on empirical evidence, so like physical or direct evidence from the geological record. And it highlights how one researcher and their team analyzed zircon crystals, and from this they found out that plate tectonics may have occurred as early as 4.2 billion years ago. So now let's look at the answer choices. A. By suggesting that the temperature of Earth's mantle 3 billion years ago was likely insufficient to allow for the level of tectonic movement predicted by computer models. This is incorrect because this isn't the way the author of Text 2 would most likely respond to what some researchers contend in Text 1, because Text 2 doesn't mention anything about temperature of the Earth's mantle. Instead, it focuses on empirical evidence and the zircon crystals and how they concluded that the plate tectonics may have occurred as early as 4.2 billion years ago, rather than the 3 billion years ago described in Text 1. So because Text 2 doesn't make any mention of temperature, we can eliminate option choice A. B. By distinguishing between computer models of Earth's mantle temperature that reliably predict the onset of plate tectonics and those that do not. This is incorrect because, for one, Text 2 doesn't make any mention of computer models, and secondly, it highlights the need for empirical evidence. Computer models are simulations, they're not empirical evidence, so the author of Text 2 wouldn't consider computer models at all in proving any claim about the inception of tectonic movement. Therefore, they wouldn't consider computer models, and we can eliminate option choice B. C. By indicating that computer models of Earth's mantle temperature are still being improved, such that new models tend to be much more reliable than their predecessors. This is incorrect for the same reason B is incorrect, because Text 2 makes the claim that the only plausible claim about the inception of tectonic movement must rest on empirical evidence. Computer models are simulations, not empirical evidence. Therefore, the author of Text 2 wouldn't consider computer models at all, no matter how much they improve. Therefore, we can eliminate option choice C. D. By asserting that a more definitive form of evidence than the computer's models suggests a different timeline for the onset of plate tectonics on Earth. So this seems to be the correct answer, because the second text highlights how the researchers used the chemical composition of magma from the zircon crystals, and based on this data they compellingly argue that plate tectonics may have occurred as early as 4.2 billion years ago, which is earlier than the 3 billion years ago described in Text 1. So this highlights how there's a more definite form of evidence, which is the composition of magma from the crystals, than the computer models, which are used in Text 1, and this suggests a different timeline for the onset of plate tectonics on Earth, which is that it occurred 4.2 billion years ago rather than 3 billion years ago. Therefore, we know that the correct answer is D.